I think the main news at this time unfolding is in Lebanon. There is they've found weapons being smuggled in, a big ship full, and there's been fighting, and the Lebanese army is trying to side with the Syrians, really. I wonder if you can see, predict, or have an insight into the unfolding events there.
Well, I'm happy that we are beginning with this subject, Morris, because on the occasion of the last interview, I did make the statement that I considered some of those, not all, who were in armed rebellion against the regime in Syria, I consider them to be terrorists. And that statement of mine has provoked some responses from people who felt the sting of it. I have no regrets of having made that statement. Those who are in alliance with the Zionists, either directly through NATO or indirectly through Saudi Arabia, through Qatar and other states or allies of the Zionists, and who are being funded and armed directly and indirectly by the Zionists in their armed insurrection against the Syrian regime, and who are committing acts of violence and slaughter, acts of terrorism, which using any yardstick qualify as terrorism, must be identified as terrorists, and I make no apologies for that statement, that they are terrorists. They must be condemned as terrorists. The news that arms are being shipped into Syria through Lebanon, as you just mentioned, does not surprise me. I think Turkey has played perhaps the dirtiest role of all. And this is not the language that I normally would use, but I have to use this language now. It's a dirty role being played by Turkey, and someone has to stand up and tell the Turkish government that to their faces, that arms and ammunition have been infiltrated into Libya the same way. And the purpose was to bring down the Libyan regime, which was a regime which was an obstacle in the path of the Zionists. And the same thing now in Syria, so that the Arab Spring could be revisited. It happened 100 years ago, as I said to you in Paris, and now again, so that regimes which are friendly to the Zionists, who are pliant with the Zionists, can now replace like those in Libya and in Syria. So we are seeing a return to the Arab Spring, and we know that on this occasion the outcome is going to be different. On the last occasion, it was a walkover. They achieved all their objectives, and they were able to establish a state of Israel in the Holy Land, and consequence of that first Arab Spring. But on this occasion, their stakes are much higher. On this occasion, they're doing these things so that they can cause the state of Israel to become the ruling state in the world, replacing the United States of America. This is a branch of knowledge that is known as eschatology, and I am speaking from Islamic eschatology. And those who know me would know that I've been expressing these views for the last 15, 20 years, that Israel is now going to make an effort, or the Zionists are now going to make an effort to cause the state of Israel to replace the United States of America as the ruling state in the world. The difference between the first Arab Spring And this Arab Spring is a man named Putin and a country named Russia. And I have a Russian student here with me here tonight. He's a student at the International Islamic University. The Deputy Prime Minister of Spain, the former Deputy Prime Minister of Spain, revealed a few days ago a conversation that he had with Putin, I don't know how many years ago. He must have taken it out of a museum. That he spoke to Putin about the sale of Russian missiles to Iran and was trying to convince Russia not to sell those missiles to Iran. And he says that Putin said, don't worry about that. Israel will take care of Iran. Those were his words. Well, I think they have a surprise coming their way if they think that Israel and Putin are friends of each other. Because on this occasion, the attack is not only on Syria, and they've not been able to succeed in Syria largely because of Russia and China. The attack is also on Iran, and because they are so obstinately, and I choose my language carefully, they have a pig-headed obsession of ruling the world. The implication is that regardless of consequences, even if it's going to be nuclear war, even if millions and millions and millions are going to die, Israel is not going to be hindered. They're going to continue pig-headedly with the effort to subdue Iran and Pakistan and Egypt and Syria. And in the process, they're going to cross a line. When they cross that line, they're going to confront Putin. That's the comment I want to make.
You mentioned Turkey just now. There is a man quoted as being an Islamic leader in America called Gulen, and he is said to be influencing the Turkish policies. Are you familiar with this man?
I am familiar with the game plan. I am familiar with the game plan. But Morris, in the Quran, Allah says that they plan their plan, and I plan my plan, and mine is a better plan. I want to share with you now one of the prophecies of Prophet Muhammad, Allah's blessings be upon him, that the viewing audience will be fascinated with. He said about the end time, he said that at that time when Jerusalem will be flourishing, and Jerusalem is now flourishing, Jerusalem is now center stage in the affairs of the world. He said at that time when Jerusalem would be flourishing, Umran no Baytul Maqdis, at that time the city of Medina, where the Prophet is buried, which used to be called Yathrib, at that time that city would be in desolation, meaning playing absolutely no role whatsoever in world affairs or in the affairs of the world of Islam. And that's where the city of Medina is today. So he's talking about today. So at that time when Jerusalem is flourishing, Yathrib or Medina would be in a state of desolation. At that time, he said, the Great War will occur. And that Great War is going to lead to the conquest of Constantinople. And so the conquest in 1455, I believe, of the city of Constantinople by the Ottoman Turks was a flash in the pan. It's not the one that's coming. The one that's coming is the one that's prophesied. And when that conquest of Constantinople takes place, of course, the implication will be that NATO will be thrown out. And if NATO is thrown out of Constantinople, that's to Russia's advantage. When Constantinople is conquered, he said, that is the time when the Antichrist will make his appearance, meaning make his appearance in our world of space and time in the form of a human being. And so Turkey has a prominent role to play in world affairs and in the affairs of the Muslim world in the very near future. And in Turkey, it is the city of Constantinople that's going to be center stage. I believe it was because of this prophecy that Mustafa Kemal and his secular Turkish nationalists decided to change the name of the city from Constantinople and to give it one of the other names that it used to have, namely Istanbul. So I know about the game plan from the United States, from the Turkish community in the United States. And I know about the link between that one and the present government in Turkey and the party which has brought this government into being. But they plan their plan, and the God above plans his plan. And as soon as Israel launches her attack, and NATO participates in it, on Syria, on Iran, on Pakistan, and on Egypt, I have been saying that there is going to be a very strong negative reaction in Turkey, and it is going to provoke civil war. You are aware of these views of mine, aren't you?
You know, I see the Western world going around the world bombing it, as particularly the Islamic world, but it's also been involved in other wars in Asia, Korea, Vietnam. But all the time, what it's doing is actually creating refugees and importing them into the Western big cities, into America, the United Kingdom. And I wonder, is this not a really essential part of their war aims to assimilate indigenous people and to break up closed communities that occur naturally in the Islamic world, for example, in Afghanistan? Are they not out to socially engineer a class of person that has no tribal loyalties and no attachment to the land?
I want to introduce you to a terminology that with which you would have been familiar when you were a schoolboy. What they're doing is they're creating carbon copies of themselves. You know about carbon copies.
Yes.
The entire effort is directed towards reproducing their way of life all over the world at the expense of indigenous ways of life. This is not happening by accident. This is an essential dimension of what is called globalization. It is not simply a matter of creating a world government. And one of the first important steps in the direction of that world government was the Western armies that launch wars all over the non-Western world, wars of aggression to colonize India, colonize Africa, colonize Malaya, colonize South America. And as you colonize these non-Western societies, you then establish institutions which would allow you to continue to influence them and to change them by proxy. So you can decolonize and get them to believe that they are no longer colonized, that they now have political freedom, and they now have economic freedom. But that's just dust in their eyes. You are actually ruling them by proxy. There was also the educational dimension of this process of westernization, political, economic, educational, cultural, even cuisine. I was just mentioning to the Pakistani student who is here that Pakistan produces very tasty bread. They call it naan. Have you ever tasted it?
Sure, naan bread.
Naan, naan bread. And they also have chicken. And they marinate the chicken with seasoning and call it chicken tikka. It's a delicious meal.
Yes.
And after they finish with the brainwashing of the Pakistani people, they then establish a McDonald's outlet in Karachi. And there's a line 5 miles long of people lined up to buy McDonald's, when the chicken tikka is far superior to the McDonald's. This process of westernization is taking place because there is a sinister agenda at work. And that agenda is to transform all the rest of mankind into carbon copies of the new Western men. Europe used to be Christian. And there was a time when Europe had values, Christian values. But then came the change. And I would direct attention, for example, to the Crusades, where a Western Christian church, not the Eastern Christian church, the Western Christian church, is now infected by a very mysterious virus. I don't know who imported the virus to Rome, to the Vatican. And this virus causes the Pope to launch crusades. And guess who are helping to finance the crusades? The European Jews are helping to finance the Western European Christian crusades. So there is a transformation which is taking place in Europe, where formerly you had a Christian world of values, and it is now being seduced. And a new Christian world, a new Western world is coming, and they call it modern Western civilization. And it has more power than the world has ever seen before. And it is this Europe, not the previous Europe that was called Christendom. It is this new actor on the stage of history that wants to transform all of mankind into carbon copies of himself. What is the explanation of this? Our Islamic eschatology tells us about Gog and Magog. And you cannot understand Gog and Magog. You cannot understand Gog and Magog unless you know politics. Gog and Magog are human beings. They are created by the one God. They are given an indestructible power. So you can't defeat them. You can't destroy them. Only God can do that. And on the one hand, they corrupt the world. Everything is corrupted. And on the other hand, they act on behalf of Israel. They're the ones who bring the Jews back to the Holy Land 2,000 years after they were expelled. They're the ones who make possible the restoration of a state of Israel in the Holy Land. Hmm?
Yes.
And the prophet spoke about Gog and Magog, and he identifies them to be the people who are at the back of this globalization process. The destruction of indigenous cultures that you have spoken about, and bringing all of mankind into one melting pot, one cultural melting pot, and it is an essentially godless melting pot. It is an essentially decadent melting pot. He said none of them, Gog and Magog, none of them dies without leaving 1,000 more behind. 1,000 more like them. So each one will create 1,000 carbon copies of himself. I would be happy, Morris, if I can leave the world with 5 students to continue my work after me. I would be grateful for 5. But they leave 1,000 behind. This is the work of Gog and Magog. A young lady in Pakistan, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. She's born in Pakistan. She lived all her life in Pakistan. But she speaks with a perfect American accent. Sometimes her accent is better than the Americans themselves. Yes. And she's proud, this Pakistani girl, she's proud of her American accent. How do we explain this? Gog and Magog do not die without leaving 1,000 more behind. And among those 1,000, a couple Pakistanis. And among those 1,000, couple Egyptians, couple Chinese, couple African. This is our eschatological explanation of the phenomenon of the destruction of indigenous cultures.
You know, in the West, there's a lot of intrigue about secret societies, the Illuminati, Bilderberg Group, and many names are thrown around, and people sort of swallow it, in my opinion, because I don't really buy it. But I wonder if you can give any insight. I don't really believe these secret societies are at the top of the pyramid of power, that they're really the Gog and Magog, if you like. But it is an open argument. Do you feel that these secret societies have much power in the world?
In the Quran, we have been commanded in our personal relations with others and in our public life with the rest of the world. The Quran has commanded us, Kulu qawlan sadida, speak in a straightforward way. Don't speak with a forked tongue. Speak in a straightforward way. Conduct your relations with the rest of mankind above board. Above board. So there must be no duplicity in conduct. That is the religion of Abraham. You cannot have a peace treaty with Constantinople, the Ottomans, and at the same time that you have this peace treaty with Constantinople, the emperor in Constantinople, you are busy in preparations for war. That's duplicity. That's not the way of those who follow the religion of Abraham. What we now have in the world is the corruption of the public life. That you have formal governments who conduct formal business with the rest of the world in a formal way above board. But they establish secret organizations to do the dirty work. You may have heard, Morris, about the CIA.
Maybe.
Yeah. The people of Haiti, Morris, the people of Haiti had such experiences with the CIA in Haiti because they made a mistake of slapping France on her face 200 years ago and defeating the French army and proclaiming the independent Black Republic of Haiti. And the Western world never forgave them for that. Never. So Haiti had to be targeted and attacked, and brutalized, to such an extent that Haiti, which is a Roman Catholic country, decided to coin a new trinity. The Father, the Son, and the CIA. That's the new trinity that Haiti recognizes. The Father, the Son, and the CIA. And then you have the Israeli Mossad. And then Iran had her Savak. And so it has become fashionable now to conduct your affairs in a duplicitous way. That you have the formal country in its jacket and tie, black tie, and presenting to the world a respectable image. And then you have your Mossad and your CIA to attack America on 9/11, and then to put the blame on Arabs and Muslims. This is what you're talking about with Freemasons and Illuminati. Secret societies which do the dirty work that they want to have done, but don't want to have their faces and their hands soiled, don't want their image to be soiled. But it's more than that. The Quran tells us that these are a people who have links with a world which is beyond our normal observation. It has not been fashionable in universities to teach about angels. Have you ever heard a university giving a lecture? It's not fashionable in universities to teach about that transcendental world in which exist the angels and in which exists what the Quran calls the jinn. And they are jinn who are evil, and they are Satans. And these underground secret societies maintain links with that invisible world. And they have satanic rituals that they have to perform in order to maintain their link with that satanic invisible world. And so when we speak about these occult societies, about Freemasonry and Illuminati, we are not talking only about misguided people acting in a duplicitous way, people who do the dirty work in secret that cannot be done in public. But we are also talking about people who have links with the invisible world and who use those links for evil purposes.
Would you include Talmudic Jews within these occult secret societies?
I believe that there would be some substance to the claim that in the Talmud you have some corruption of what was given in the Torah to Moses, and that you certainly have some of that link with the occult come emerging out of the Talmud. Yes.
Thank you. Yes, personally, I'd put them at the very top of all of the secret societies. In Islam, free mixing is not really permitted, and the West is always talking about human rights. And I don't live in a bad neighborhood, but I can see drunks on the street, and I'm sure they're very proud of the human rights they have to drink in public and behave like they do. But I would like you to tackle and explain the issue of free mixing, and I do believe this is a war aim. That free mixing must be instilled, and everyone must go through it and have it.
Well, we are not a people who are prepared to take another man's wife in our arms and go dancing with her. We are a people who believe that there is a certain prohibited space between the male and the female. That prohibited space is not only physical, not only spatial, it is also moral, it is also social. But if you went into the home of Prophet Muhammad, Allah's blessings be upon him, you sat down, one of his wives will come and serve you. He didn't have any Indonesian maids. No, because in that time we didn't have paper money to impoverish a people and then put them into slavery. So Indonesian maids now have to work for a slave salary. So one of his wives will come and serve you. She's not prohibited from that. We are permitted to sit with women and converse with them. But it must be on subjects which are within the realm of modesty and chastity. And so the prohibited space will prohibit conversations which would be considered to be morally negative. But when it comes to male-female relationship in Islam, I think we got a few lessons to teach modern Western civilization. And to those who had problems with Monica Lewinsky. When we build our Muslim villages, any woman who comes to our village, and Morris, not all women are beautiful. You know that. When we build our Muslim village, and a woman comes to the village and she says that I want a husband, somebody has to marry her. And so we do not have in Islam this conception that a man must have only one wife. That good men have only one wife. In Islam, it is the right of a woman to have a husband. In fact, we place far more emphasis on her right to have a husband than his right to have a wife. And so any woman who comes to our Muslim village and she says that I want a husband, somebody has to be marrying, somebody has to marry her. Somebody has to marry her. And so you do not marry only because of physical attraction. You do not marry only because of chemistry. You also marry because of compassion. You also marry because of a moral obligation to take care of women, to take care of children. And so our Prophet, Allah's blessings be upon him, would have a number of huts in a circle. These are not like palaces in West Palm Beach. These are huts. And each wife would stay in a hut. And the women have a wonderful life amongst themselves. And a man would maintain all his wives. The Quran placed a limit of 4 wives. But you may marry only on the condition that you have the means to maintain them, and that you show some equity in your relationship with the wives. You do not discriminate in favor of one and against another. In our system are plural marriages, and in our system in which there is a prohibited space which must not be violated, we have succeeded in establishing stable families and in preserving the family unit, in consequence of which there are far less divorces, far less broken homes, far less children of broken families. And at the time of Christmas, you will see the boy in the supermarket looking at the greeting cards. And after he's gone, then you go to see what was he trying to buy. And there you see he's trying to buy a Christmas card. And the Christmas card is for daddy's wife and mummy's husband. Because it's a divorce. And daddy has married someone else. And mummy has married someone else. And he's left out in the cold. Western civilization can learn some lessons from the male-female relationship in Islam, which has successfully established the stable family unit. And that stable family unit is the foundation of a stable social order. Wherever the Western world has gone with its male-female relationship, its feminist revolution, society is crumbling. Society is disintegrating. And the only reason why people can't recognize it is because you have CNN and ABC and NBC and the newspapers and radio and television to constantly distract their attention. So they have capacity to think only moment to moment. The thinking capacity for deep thought is gone. Brainwashed minds can only think moment to moment.
You remind me of what Bashar Assad has just said in an interview with Russia Today. He said, we lost the media war, on the first day, but it's not the important battle. But, you mentioned earlier the Ottoman Empire and the duplicitous acts of some Western governments. And it made me think about Wahhabism and the beginning of it. And it is really capturing so much of the Arab world now, and maybe in Pakistan too. Is it not rather disruptive?
There are 2 terms that are used. One is Wahhabi, and it is used because the name of the founder was Abdul Wahhab. And so from Abdul Wahhab, they're called Wahhabis. People who follow Abdul Wahhab are called Wahhabis. But they didn't like that term. And so they have coined another term. They call it Salafi. And this referred to the early community. Like you had the early Christians, so too you had the early Muslim community. And they say that our our Salafi community is one which struggles to restore the way of life of the early Muslims, the Salafis. But your question is directed towards the political implications of the emergence of the Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia. And without any question of a doubt, this was a marriage of convenience between a religious movement that was in very many respects similar to Protestantism in Europe, a religious movement which was turning away from the spiritual heart of the religious way of life and was restricting the religious way of life to the following literal interpretation of only texts. Religion is founded on texts, T-E-X-T-S, and these texts must be understood literally unless interpreted otherwise by the Prophet himself and by his companions. It led to a kind of blindness, and as a consequence, this marriage of convenience between the religious movement and the political movement led by the Saudi family eventually made an alliance with Britain in the first Arab Spring, when Britain was looking for pro-Western governments to rule over the Arab world. And they successfully installed in Arabia a pro-Western regime called Saudi Arabia. This was the first major sign of a blindness, a religious blindness in the Wahhabi movement of the Salafis, that they could not stand up and offer a masculine challenge to this betrayal of the Prophet and betrayal of Islam in a Saudi Arabia which has become an ally of the modern West, and as a consequence an ally of the Zionists. That Wahhabi blindness has continued to this day, because Saudi Arabia has come out from behind the curtains, and Saudi Arabia has now become a strategic ally of the state of Israel, and so too the state of Qatar. And as yet we do not have, there are voices of dissent in Saudi Arabia, definitely. And there are many, many Saudis who are now listening to me. Yes. But the Saudi religious establishment continues to display a pathetic blindness and an incapacity to recognize the betrayal and to stand up and to denounce it and to struggle to liberate Arabia from the hands of those who have taken it into the bosom of Zionism. This is my political assessment of the Wahhabi movement.
Finally, perhaps I could ask you about Russia's stance. It's becoming more and more bellicose. It's complaining about Israeli air raids in Lebanon, or mock air raids, I should say, and training Syrian opposition in Kosovo. I don't know. It just seems that Russia is really, Putin is not even turning up for the NATO summit, you know? Can you hear me? Hello?
I think Russia has drawn a line in the sand. Russia has drawn a line in the sand. If you cross that line, you're going to face us. That's where we are today. Putin is making it clear that if you proceed on the course on which you are going, you're going to end up with a nuclear war on your hands. In our last interview, you remember that the Russian chief of staff has spoken about a preemptive strike, you remember?
Yes.
Yeah. So they're making it very clear. I think China as well, both Russia and China, that there's a line that you may not cross, and if you cross that line, of course Israel is going to cross the line. There's no question about it. You're going to end up with world war on your hands. That is what our Prophet has spoken about as al-malhama. It comes after Jerusalem is center stage and Medina is in a state of desolation. Then you get the malhama. That's where we are now. And that malhama, or that great war, which is coming, is going to lead to the conquest of Constantinople, which is a fascinating subject, Morris, that conquest of Constantinople.
Only today, Medvedev also warned of a possible nuclear war. So things are heating up. And I forgot to ask you about Iran. It is now supplying Turkey with more energy, more oil, and more electricity in the face of the sanctions. Perhaps these P5+1 talks that are taking place with Iran are supposedly about nuclear power, but probably have nothing to do with it. I mean, I think it's a relationship. If Iran is now supplying Turkey with more energy, and they just had the P5+1 talks in Istanbul, perhaps there's a connection.
I don't think the Turkish government has ever concealed its position of disagreement with the sanctions on Iran. The Turkish government has never concealed its position on that. And in the same way that India has responded by entering into direct negotiations with Iran and to bypass the banking system, Turkey feels absolutely no reluctance, no need to do otherwise, and Turkey is also following in the path of India in respect of economic ties with Iran.
I've no more to ask you now. Is there anything that I should have asked or that I could have asked? Anything you'd like to add?
Yes, for our Muslim audiences in Turkey and in Morocco and in Algeria, in Pakistan, in India, in United States, in Canada, in Australia, in Britain. We have one from Britain right here. They want to know something more about you, so why don't you tell them something about yourself?
Well, you know, I keep wandering around. I don't grow roots, but I land on my feet, and I tried many careers. I grew up as a Jew. My parents traveled a lot. I don't keep the identity, and this is a very honorable moment to have an interview with the Sheik Imran Hosein, and I'm doing my very best on my YouTube channel. And I'm not married. The most important thing I left till the end. So you can always write a message on YouTube to me.
It is something refreshing, Morris, that you and I could dialogue, you and I could exchange views in a non-hostile, non-combative relationship like this. It sends a message to the rest of the world that it is still possible for us to salvage something that we had yesterday, when men of ideas could sit down together from the East and from the West and have a civilized conversation before the Zionist media took over in launching their nasty war on Islam to try to paint Islam in the ugliest of all colors. It is refreshing, it is exhilarating to find in you, Morris, someone who is not prepared to accept that paint job.
Well, it's been an absolute honor for me. I can't thank you enough.